YouTubers, it's Don from trueCABLE coming back at you again, but I brought friends. With me, I've got Dave Harris, technical specialist, part of our technical department at trueCABLE. And I've also got Mikayla Moulton from our marketing department. And Mikayla is going to be refereeing and asking questions, and we're going to go ahead and answer them. And the topic is, what are Keystone Jacks? Where are they used? What makes them a better termination method than others? So there's a series of questions that we've put together that we thought would be very useful for the audience, so that you can better understand what this doodad is and why it's important to you. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mikayla at this point. Mikayla?
All right, let's kick it off with our first virtual Q&A, Keystone Jack edition. So Dave, we're going to ask you, what is a Keystone Jack?
A jack is a receptacle for a plug. In this case, we're talking about RJ45 Ethernet plugs. And the Keystone Jack is one example of a jack that will accept those. Now, historically, and I'm talking about way back in history, still construction, but when they constructed stone arches, the last stone to go in was called the keystone, and it had to be perfectly prepared. It had to fit exactly, or the entire arch would fail. So a keystone is for fitment. And here's a keystone in a surface box, and you can see that this green keystone is right flush with the edge, and it completely takes up this hole. That's because a Keystone Jack is 14.5 millimeters wide and 16 millimeters tall, no matter who makes it. Also, the back set to the load-bearing part of the latch, 8 millimeters every single time. And so Keystone is a standard for both hardware pieces like surface mount box, wall plates, patch panels. If they say that they're for Keystone Jacks, that's because of what will fit them, and our Keystone Jacks will.
Thanks, Dave. So the next one, we're going to go ahead and ask, what are Keystone Jacks used for?
All right, so Keystone Jacks, what are they used for? Keystone Jacks are used for what's known as rack-to-jack structured cable or permanent links. Now, what does that look like? Well, I've got some pictures. I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to show you. Okay, so in this picture example, what you've got here is a network setup. You got the equipment, you've got cabling, you've got a cable modem that's here. You've got a patch panel. You've got your solid copper permanent links coming in. They're mounted. That stuff is running through the walls of the structure. And then this solid copper cable is coming in, and then it's going down into a patch panel. And this patch panel is a toolless style, which means that it's basically a blank frame, and it's got 12 spots to snap in standard format keystones. And so you snap in the keystone after it's been terminated to your solid copper cable, and then you can use it to patch into your Ethernet switch with patch cables. So if you see here, each one of these solid copper permanent links has been terminated to a keystone, and then you use a patch cord to connect from the keystone to your Ethernet switch. And so what does that look like up front? Well, here's a great side shot example of that. So this is the side of the patch panel, and you can see the Keystone Jacks here. And you can see the solid copper permanent link cable that's coming into the back of the keystones. And then you can see on in the front of the keystone where the port is, that there is a RJ45 connector that's already attached to a patch cable, and that's running into the switch. And so essentially, Keystone Jacks are a way to make your installation permanent and structured and organized.
We're going to go right back to Dave with a new question. This one is, are Keystone Jacks required when establishing a network connection?
A simple patch cable is sufficient for establishing a network connection between two devices. The Keystone Jacks will be in there if part of your channel, your network channel, is a permanent installation in a business or residence. Keystone Jacks make plugging and unplugging patch cords more convenient, but they in and of themselves are not necessary for the network to work.
Don, can you tell us the difference between Keystone Jacks and RJ45s?
Keystone Jacks and RJ45s are both two ways of terminating So the similarity between them, actually, to understand the differences, it's better to understand the similarity first. So both of those items are something you attach to an Ethernet cable, raw bulk unterminated cable, to give it something so it can actually plug into something else or be plugged into. So they're both ways of terminating an Ethernet cable. An RJ45 is a male plug that plugs into something, and a Keystone Jack is a female port that gets plugged into. So going back to the previous, some example pictures that I've got, I'll show you kind of like some of the differences here. This is a RJ45 connector that has been, it's not fully terminated to the cable yet, but that is a male connector, and that connects onto the end of the Ethernet cable to plug into a Keystone Jack. And an RJ45 plug is essentially nothing more than a piece of plastic. It is got a plastic housing with a retaining clip. It has 8 golden contacts with teeth on it that make contact with the copper conductor wires. And RJ45 plugs do not have a category per se, although we have put categories on them on our website. That's only to help our customers shop for the appropriate cable that'll work. That's our brand cable with the plug. What really matters with RJ45 plugs is fitness, that being the diameter that can be accepted in regards to thickness of the cable, and also the front of the plug has holes in it, and those holes are critical for proper fitment of the actual conductors, and there's 8 of them that go through the front of the plug or into the plug to terminate the connection. So that is essentially an RJ45. It's a piece of plastic with 8 golden contacts, and it's got no secret sauce inside of it. It's just a piece of plastic. So that's an RJ45. Now, when it comes to a Keystone Jack, it terminates very differently. In the case of a Keystone Jack, this is where the RJ45 plug would plug into, and that looks like that. So this is not mounted in a wall plate or a patch panel, but this Keystone Jack has been terminated to a solid copper Ethernet cable here, and it's been terminated into what's known as IDC terminals, or insulation displacement contact terminals. And then a RJ45 plug with attached to a patch cable is plugged into the front of that jack. And some of the biggest differentiators between RJ45 plugs and Keystone Jacks is that Keystone Jacks, they give you flexibility. So if you're installing your cabling in your walls, it makes little sense to terminate everything to RJ45s. For multiple reasons. The biggest one actually is due to performance, because you're taking a risk by putting RJ45s onto solid copper Ethernet, especially both ends. That's never a good idea. RJ45s have their uses, but not at both ends of an Ethernet cable, and certainly not in a good structure, not a well-planned structured cabling system. So that's what Keystones are for. Keystones are designed to provide durability and stability to the connection. And they also have a circuit board inside of them, which helps keep up the performance of your links. And that's very important. And that's why Keystone Jacks happen to be category rated, which we'll get into a little bit later. So that's essentially the difference between Keystone Jacks and RJ45s.
Perfect. So Don, another question for you. Would you then say that Keystone Jacks are preferable to using RJ45 plugs?
I mean, obviously, each installation is different. So if you're going to be connecting, like if let's say you've got 2 pieces of equipment next to each other, a cable modem and a router. In that case, you would just use a factory-made pre-terminated patch cord. You don't need anything more than that. Key being factory-made pre-terminated. Don't go making your own patch cables, because again, you can get into trouble. Despite everybody's best efforts at making the process as simple as possible and documenting the cable diameters and the plugs and then testing, fitting them and stuff like that, the problem is that manufacturing variability can sometimes come into play, and sometimes things get a little out of tolerance and you can get unexpected results. I mean, again, like I said, RJ45s have their place, especially at the one end of a PoE run, to plug into, for example, a surveillance camera or a Wi-Fi access point, so you can provide data and power to the device at the same time. But the rest of the links that are in your installation, if you want to do it right, should be basically keystone to keystone, or basically called rack to jack patch panel to keystone. So keystones are very good for keeping your cable runs not only organized but flexible, because let's say you decide to move some stuff around. So let me give you an example. Let's say you decide to run one long cable from a remote bedroom down in your basement, and you terminate both ends to RJ45s. Well, you already know that's not a good idea from a performance standpoint, but it's also not a good idea from a flexibility standpoint. Let's say you decide to move your television or computer or whatever it is to the other side of the room, but you've only got this much cable sticking up out of your floor or wall or whatever. Well, now you've got a problem. Now you have to buy like a coupler, another cable, stuff like that. It's easier just to have a port in a wall and then just buy a longer patch cable if you need them. Not only is it going to cause you less difficulty with data transmission, but it's going to allow you to be able to move things around much more easily.
Dave, I'm going to go back and pick your brain a little bit more. So the question I have for you is, where are Keystone Jacks mounted? Are they in walls or somewhere else?
Anywhere you want to plug in a patch cable to a network device, it's good to have a Keystone Jack ready to be plugged into. If you want to put them in the walls, as many people do, a wall plate, they snap right into the wall plate, attach the wall plate to the wall, and you have an outlet for Ethernet. If you're like above a suspended ceiling or maybe out in a warehouse or something like that, the surface mount boxes come in handy. And then if you're close to the switch or router where you're going to have probably several or more patch cables going to jacks, you'll mount those Keystone Jacks in a patch panel, which is prepared for the Keystone Jack standard, meaning sized properly for them. Keystone Jacks go where you want Ethernet to be available. And you might use a different method to attach it depending on where it's located, whether it's in the wall, in the ceiling, or next to the router.
Hey, Dave, I'd like to add, and maybe I could show a couple of pictures to folks so that maybe you can
Absolutely.
Demonstrate what we're talking about. So here we've got essentially a patch panel. This is a residential unshielded one where you've got keystones that are mounted into a patch panel. And this is, I guess, the head end of the installation. Okay, so you've got cabling that's running through the structure, okay, and it's going into the patch panel, but these cables all go through here and then into the structure, and they're going to end up in various places. And that's one of the various places. Okay.
So Don, I kind of want to go into types of Keystone Jacks. So on our website, we sell Cat 5e, Cat 6, and Cat 6a. So why are Keystone Jacks rated by category?
Keystone Jacks are rated by category because, first of all, there's multiple kinds of category cable out there. The ones like trueCABLE sells are the ANSI TIA recognized ones except Cat 8, but Cat 5e, Cat 6, Cat 6a. And each keystone is required to operate at a higher frequency in order to support the cable and to make, because if you go taking a Cat 5e keystone that's rated for a lower frequency and attach it to a Cat 6a solid copper permanent link cable, you just effectively created yourself a Cat 5e overall channel or a permanent link. So everything has to match. Except the RJ45 plugs, that doesn't matter as far as category fitment matters there, as I said before. But what matters with keystones is you've got to match the cable category to the Keystone Jack, because Keystone Jacks have to operate at higher frequencies in order to achieve the higher frequencies the cable can achieve to get higher bandwidths. So therefore, Cat 5e for Cat 5e, Cat 6 for Cat 6, and Cat 6a for Cat 6a. And each one has a different printed circuit board inside that is tuned to operate at a specific frequency.
So Dave, is there a specific way to wire a Keystone Jack?
There are two specific ways, and they're standardized. TIA 568A and TIA 568B. And what they have to do with is the sequence of the different conductors inside the cable. And those conductors are color coded, so is the sequence. And you have to choose one or the other, A or B. And fortunately, both of them are labeled on our Keystone Jacks to facilitate wiring them correctly.
So Don, this one's a pretty big one that we need some help kind of explaining. So our Keystone Jacks are component rated. What does that mean?
It's actually a bigger discussion than that, Mikayla. Our Keystone Jacks are a bit special in a good way. They're not only component rated, but they also impedance match in their data center ready, which is kind of like the umbrella of component rating that we use. Component rated Keystone Jacks, they need to, there's two different kinds of Keystone Jacks out there. One is component rated, the other one is channel level. So component rated Keystone Jacks are held to very strict limits and test requirements as found in the ANSI TIA 568 2.d connection hardware requirements found in the standard. And they have to pass by themselves. In other words, they can't be hooked into an installation and then certified afterward and then get called Cat 6A rated or Cat 6 rated or anything like that. They actually have to achieve that rating twice during production, once on the printed circuit board and then after being constructed in the jack. So they have to pass strict limits for crosstalk, near end and far end, return loss, insertion loss. They have to pass strict alien crosstalk requirements. And that is something that may not be specifically tested for and documented during manufacture of what's known as a channel level or commodity level piece. And the other thing is our keystones are what's known as impedance matching. So when the keystone receives an electrical signal, there's an electrical field and a magnetic field. And what the impedance matching does is it actually impedance matches disparate conductor gauges and types, because the standard calls for 100 ohm twisted pair impedance. That's what all Ethernet cable is held to, a standard of 100 ohm nominal. There's a plus or minus 15 on it. So what the impedance matching does is it tries its best to narrow the gap on that plus or minus 15 variable slop, so to speak, that's built into the standard. And that helps improve performance over your channel. Because if you hook up a different manufacturer's patch cord that may have a slightly different impedance, it might be 98 ohm. And then you hook in some solid copper bulk Ethernet that you're terminating into the other side of the Keystone Jack. That could be 105 ohm. So the actual Keystone will match those impedances as best as it can to improve data performance or handling over the entire cable run. The next part of it is data center ready. What that means, and this is an issue that's occurred many times in data centers, is sometimes data inside of a data center, which is not a very large structure, they require short permanent links. Sometimes as short as 3 feet. Sometimes, it's usually not more than 20 feet. And so sometimes these short links, permanent links, they get tested and they fail due to internal cable or basically too much crosstalk going on inside of the cable bouncing back between the two keystones. This can cause a fail for, basically crosstalk near end and far end inside of the run. So what the data center ready part of our keystones does, and it's part of the component rated, is that it allows you to use a short link all the way down to a meter long, which is a mere 3 feet. Now, most people aren't going to be constructing permanent links that are only, a keystone to a keystone only 3 feet long, but you can get away with it. And of course, they go to the maximum 90 meter or 295 foot limit of the standard, depending on temperature. So the data center ready is yet another feature of the overall component rating that we stamp onto our Keystone Jacks.
what is the difference between punch down and toolless Keystone Jacks? Because we have two versions.
The punch down version requires a punch down tool of some type to push the conductors down into the IDC contacts, the insulation displacement contacts. A toolless jack, on the other hand, has a hinged lid on it, which when closed also has fixtures on the inside that push down all of the conductors into their slots. So a punch down tool is not required for the toolless type. It's not that you can get away without any tools at all, but you don't have to have an expensive punch down tool to do the toolless type.
John, this next question kind of piggybacks off of the question I just asked Dave, but what tools are needed to install Keystone Jacks?
So when it comes to a punch down Keystone Jack, you're going to take your 8 wires, which are basically, you got four twisted pairs, 8 total wires. And the wires actually get put into the slots and then punched down one of 2 ways in our punch down keystones. And that requires a tool. And a tool that a lot of people are familiar with is what's known as a 110 impact tool. It's a kinetic energy tool. And the purpose of it is that it's got a blade that pushes the conductor into the slot to make electrical contact. And then it flush cuts the excess conductor off at the end of the cycle. And that means, but you have to do eight separate punches to get all 8 wires seated. Now, a more convenient method would be our rapid Keystone Jack termination tool, which works only with our jacks. Okay, so the rapid termination tool, what it does is it allows you to put a pre-wired jack into the termination tool and then close the handle, and it will seat all 8 conductors and flush cut them all at the same time. And so you can actually see the die head that's used here, and these are the blades that seat the conductors, and then on the side of this tool head you see 2 flush cut blades. And the end result is you can literally take your jack, put it in the tool, close it up, it'll seat the conductors, cut off those conductors, and you end up with a fully terminated Keystone Jack. And that greatly speeds up the process. Now, when it comes to toolless Keystone Jacks, the way a toolless Keystone Jack is wired and terminated is you will open up the keystone, it's got a hinged lid on it, and then it's got an IDC wiring cap. And that is for the person to wire up the conductors into the appropriate slots, and the color code pattern is printed on the side of the cap. Once you've got that cap wired up, you flush cut off the conductors, then you put the cap into the jack housing, and then you take that lid and you close it. And then you've got a fully terminated keystone that you can plug a patch cable into. Obviously, you're going to need some tools. So toolless does not really mean no tools. Tools means no dedicated 110 punch down tool. That's what that means. Some people get a little flustered when they find out that there actually are tools involved. You're going to have to be able to strip your cable, have to have a way to strip the cable. You have to have a flush cutter to prep the cable and flush cut off the conductors from the IDC cap. Because once you've got that, that cap wired up, you're going to have to flush cut these conductors off. And then once you get the cap put into the jack, you close that lid. You may not have the finger strength to actually close that lid. So we have a dedicated parallel crimping plier for that particular task. It's optional, but I recommend it. And so what you can do is you can use it to actually close the hinged caps on our shielded and unshielded toolless keystones, as well as our field termination plugs. And it's a simple matter of putting the item that you're closing into the tool, and the way that the jaws close is they close in a parallel fashion. So they don't close on an angle. Now, in a pinch, you can also use channel locks, basically slip joint pliers. And you can also use that to close the toolless mechanism if you need. It's up to you. Our parallel crimping pliers are more precise.
Dave, I'm going to go back to you with this question. Can you reuse Keystone Jacks?
Our Keystone Jacks can be re-terminated up to 20 times each. I'm not sure if that's the same for other manufacturers, but I imagine they can be re-terminated at least a few times. So yes, unlike an RJ45 modular plug, if you make a mistake or would like to try to improve your termination, just pull the wires out and start again.
Dave hit on the number of re-terminations and things like that. The answer is yes. There's a few. I mean, there's a couple of things you should know, but the first thing is, per the standard, the component standard, the Keystone Jack IDC portion, where you actually punch in the wires or the hinged mechanism closes on the conductive cap, that must be durable to the point of at least 20 terminations. That's per the standard. The RJ45 portion, where you plug in a patch cable, the male plug into the Keystone, has to go to withstand at least 750 terminations. That's by the standard. One caveat with our Keystones that people should be aware of is that if you do terminate with the thicker 23 or 22 AWG solid copper wire, you cannot go down a size to like 24, because the spring wires will have been spread a little too much and could cause improper electrical contact. So if you use a Keystone for 23 AWG, you may re-terminate it, but only to 23 AWG. If you try to go to 24, you may get inconsistent results.
So Dawn, if I go to the site right now and I'm on our Keystone Jacks, I'm going to see shielded and unshielded. How am I supposed to know which one I need for my installation?
That's a really easy one to answer. If you're using shielded cable, you should use a shielded Keystone Jack. If you're using unshielded cable, you should use an unshielded Keystone Jack. Now, technically speaking, there's no harm in using a shielded Keystone on an unshielded cable. It'll work. However, it's a bad practice, because someone who comes along and sees that shielded Keystone may assume that the entire cable is actually shielded and bonded to the Keystone, and get and not understand exactly how the cable is constructed. So best practice, shielded for shielded and unshielded for unshielded cable. And especially when you're dealing with shielded cable, you have to use a shielded Keystone, because you have to properly bond the cable shield to the Keystone so that it can be bonded to ground. Otherwise, the cable shield will not function properly.
All right, this Q&A session is starting to come to an end. So I have one last question. And Dave, I'm picking on you one last time. So RJ45 plugs use gold-plated contacts. So why are the IDC contacts in Keystone Jacks nickel-plated?
It's about the physical properties of the different metals. All of the contacts use a substrate of bronze. And the contacts for the RJ45 portion are coated with gold, or plated with gold. And that's because gold has the highest conductivity of any available metal. Where the wires connect to the Keystone Jack, that's the IDC towers. And the reason they're not plated in gold is because of hardness. Not only is gold highest in conductivity, it's always also highest in softness. Nickel is harder than copper. And so when the copper wire goes down into the IDC tower, the hard nickel plating actually cuts into the copper a little bit, because the nickel is harder than the copper. If it were gold instead of nickel, since the bronze underneath the nickel and the copper outside of the nickel, since they're both harder than gold, they would wipe the gold right off when you put that wire down in there. So the reason for nickel is the hardness. Maybe I could have just said that.
Nice, simple and easy enough. Well, that's all the questions I have today. So thank you both for letting me pick your brains and crash your party. And with that, Dawn, I'll let you end this Q&A.
Hopefully this helped clear things up for you and why Keystones are greatly superior to RJ45s. I mean, RJ45s have their place, obviously, pre-terminated, factory made at the end of patch cords. But if you have to put one on yourself, there are some limited circumstances where you may be forced into doing it. But in general, Keystones are king because of the way they terminate, their performance advantages, especially with ours, the component rating. So that is the direction to go. And hopefully you found this education. But check out our Cable Academy, which has a much more about lengths, temperatures, conduit loading, how to terminate keystones, blow by blow with a video. So our Cable Academy is a great resource to continue your research at www.truecable.com. At the top left of your screen, top right of your screen, you'll see a link for Cable Academy. And there's 170 plus blogs. A lot have embedded videos too in there for your reading and watching enjoyment. You could spend weeks in. So, for that, I will say, you have a wonderful day and happy networking.